Yeah. So, hello, Rabbi Julie Jacobs. It's lovely to have you with us, and we're very grateful for your time today on having this very important discussion on faith, religion, and spirituality in our modern age. I guess I'd like to start as a chaplain working with young people. In your work, it says that you combine tradition and a modern approach to creating a dynamic and inclusive environment. And just would like maybe you just to comment on how exactly you do that. And yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me. And it's a pleasure to meet you and to be with you and to share thoughts in this crucial area in our lives where I think a lot of people might not understand or realize how religion and spirituality can help heal ourselves and help us learn who we are. In Judaism, one of our fundamental teachings is that we are all created in God's image, and that understanding what that means to each person individually is the complicated piece, right? To say, I accept you for who you are, you accept me for who I am, because we were all created to be who we are. And so that's, I think, how we start figuring out how to take the traditions and our rituals, the symbols, our teachings, and then apply them to how we've developed our minds over time, the way we look at the world. And so then we say, okay, everybody, I guess, is engaged and is achieves their goals based on their strength, from strength to strength. So we have a saying at the end of each book of the Torah, or the 5 books of Moses, or the Old Testament, right? At the end of every book, when we finish, we say, from strength to strength. So we move on, we are strengthened, and that we're supposed to recognize within ourselves what that is. And sometimes it's hard to see it in ourselves, so we have to rely on others to also understand that.
It's interesting you use the word healing there, or heal, because it's quite the view that I have, is that religion and faith and spirituality does have the power to heal us, especially in our times. Thank you.
I don't know what that noise is.
I was looking, if I may, I was looking at the beautiful names of your children, and I'm asking these questions. I'm talking about this because it's specific to religious people, because and I know they all have beautiful names, and they probably have meaning. And we talk about the meaning crisis. So you've got is it Zev, Rhea, Aiton, and Caleb?
Yes.
Now, I haven't got a boy. God's given me 2 beautiful daughters, Ziva and Jara, but Caleb was a boy's name for us. If we had a boy, it was definitely going to be Caleb. And I know it's being religious, so this is why I'm bringing this up. And you spoke about rituals. Religious people do rituals. And I'd argue that even if you're not religious and you don't go to synagogue, church, or shul, or something, whatever it is, you engage in rituals every day that carry meaning, like a handshake, even a handshake. But for religious people, it might be bowing or kissing or reading a book. Or but Caleb, I think it means like a dog, loyalty of a dog spirit.
Yeah, or from the heart.
Yeah.
So Lev also means heart in Hebrew.
Yeah.
So, and I did choose the name Caleb for my child because he's one of my favorite, I would say, heroes or characters in the Bible. That Caleb was the one who reported back on the beauty of the promised land and wasn't afraid to speak his mind, and was courageous and was loyal, right? Had that. So it's interesting you bring up the children, because you're right. That's a way that we can be religious without being religious, right? That we kind of take on the traditions that we have. And my husband and I decided to name our children. Well, 3 out of 4 of them are named after someone who passed away. So that's the tradition in Judaism. In European Judaism, or Ashkenazi Judaism, is to name after people who pass away, and you honor them. You can use a first initial, or you can use the meaning. So, Zev, for example, is named after my husband's grandfather, who was, his Yiddish name was Velvel, which is this, anyway, it's a long story. Zeph means wolf. But when we got to Caleb, we were already out of names. I tell him we named after all the people we could think of. So we chose a name from the Bible for him. Yes. So, but all of the names have significant meaning to us. And so therefore they already have the cultural or the traditional part in them without us having to even do anything, right? They're already feeling the connection.
Yeah. Yeah. In a sense, it's sacramental, the things, they words are not just nothing, and everything's not just nothing. Everything is made on purpose and for meaning. So I guess when you started your talk, or your answer, when you're talking about made in the image of God, and we talk about the meaning crisis, where do we go? Who do we follow? What do we be like? And there's so many conflicting messages out there. But I think that basis of you've been made in the image of God, and your life means something. Even your name means something. Even a rock means something. There's nothing that's in this creation that's just meaningless. Maybe evil, if you like to say it's the absence of meaning, and then goodness is maybe if we could say so. Darkness and evil is just the absence of that, and not knowing that. Rabbi, I want to just get your thoughts on. Okay, you spoke about how to bring you saw strength to strength. So it sounds like continually evolving thing. Sorry. But are there any practical advice for our youngsters out there? Because not all of them are church going, or go to synagogue, or go to mosque, or whatever it is may be. But I will say this: they don't have too much of the hang up that perhaps my generation had of the new atheist movement that really attacked religion, which I want to talk about in a moment. It really attacked religion as something that's for non-rational people, or irrational people, for stupid people, to put it in their terms. It's just they don't have that hang up anymore. So that's past. I think that movement's past, and there's fertile ground for youngsters to understand the role religion can play. So I suppose just comment on some practical advice for youngsters today to find meaning and purpose in this chaotic moment we're living in.
Sure. I think the young generations are very inquisitive, and they want to understand the meaning behind things. I know when I was a kid and I went to religious school, and my parents made me go to religious school, and I had to learn everything by rote and understand what the prayers were and understand the verses and everything. I wasn't asked my opinion on things, really. It was more, well, this is what we do, and this is what the tradition tells us. And by really understanding and learning about the history and understanding the why and how we got here, I think that's a start to kind of say, well, why did I even have to do this? Or why do I have, what's the idea behind going to a prayer service? Sometimes it's just about being with other people, and that's the connection. I think that it's hard for anybody, whether you're, whatever age you are, to really understand what maybe spirituality is, because a lot of it comes from life experience and figuring out those areas that we don't have answers to have faith, to rely on something that is beyond ourselves to understand it. So, if we look at, for example, like you said, a rock is something, right? Sometimes I'll talk to my students and say, when I'm sitting and having a conversation with it, and we're going to Starbucks, or something, we're having a coffee, if I can understand that even that cup of coffee, or even that ability to sit down with someone and using that cup as an example, is something that has a holy part, like that is something that is something that we can explain the science of it, but that is causing a connection, that there's something special about it and unique that is enabling us to actually have that conversation. It's like that vessel, and in that is something that has purpose and meaning. It's not just a cup of coffee. It's something that is bringing us together, and we can choose whether or not to add spirituality to that, to add God's presence, or whatever we define as God. I think that we all have different understandings. I come at it as a part of who I am. Like, my spirituality is part of, I feel like, how do you, do what you do? Or, and sometimes I feel disconnected. That's part of it, because then you yearn to find the connection, right? Yeah. But I think in times where we don't have the answers, especially, it's so, important that we can rely on this, I would say, mysterious, sometimes not visible to the eye, piece of us that we can rely on to answer those questions, right? Because it takes the pressure off of also trying to figure it all out. Well, sometimes it's like, it's in God's hands. Well, what is in God's hands, right? Really, what does that mean? We do have choice. We do have the ability to, decide between good and evil. We're all given a pure soul from the beginning. And every choice we make, we can choose whether or not that's a holy choice. Like, I'm going to have a conversation with you right now, and we're going to figure out a way to impart some kind of wisdom or share something so maybe one person will connect to it, and therefore they'll have something elevated in their lives. So I think practically, you go grab something and you say, I am so blessed or honored to have this cup of coffee with you, and just say, I'm really grateful for being here. And that is a practical way, I guess, to have some kind of religiousness without thinking of it as I'm going to church or I'm going to this. No, I'm just recognizing the fact that I have a blessing. I have a gift right here. And it could be something very, very tiny. So I go with the mundane, like the things that might be boring. I try to elevate them into that's maybe homework. Oh my gosh, but look what you're doing and look what you're learning. And you have that tool right there because it's a gift. So that's my approach to life. Wake up in the morning, thank God. Well, you can say, and it's hard not to say, oh, wake up and I'm so exhausted. How am I going to go on with my day? How am I going to move on? I didn't sleep well. But the fact that you're awake is in and of itself, okay, I am awake.
Yeah.
And that can just take you through the entire day. And that to me is practical.
Yeah. You remind me of, because we spoke about a rock and then you spoke about just a cup. Jacob's dream when he slipped his head on a rock, he was sleeping, and then he said when he had his dream and then he woke up and he anointed the rock and made it holy and said, surely God is in this place, and it's just the rock, like in the desert, so there's nothing there, but there's so much there, and in a interaction. And also you remind me of, I don't know if I'm familiar with Martin Buber.
Yes.
Jewish philosopher, who said when two humans connect authentically, the God is the electricity that surges between them. And I love that. I really love that. So it's in the mundane religious rituals, like having a cup of coffee or shaking hands or even a smile across the way. This is very good that we're talking about this, because I read a lot of Jonathan Haidt's work, clinical psychologist, and his Substack called After Babel. And he wrote a very good article on how the Jewish faith can help with the disconnection and the traditions that the Jewish faith brings. And one of them was embodied practices on a weekly basis. Now, we did say not everyone's going to go to synagogue or shul or temple, but we are living what Jonathan Haidt calls in a phone-based child. For a lot of our youth and youngsters are living through their phones and with their phones, and what's that doing is taking them out of the real world and these embodied experiences. So the Jewish faith and religion can teach people that doing something embodied, singing songs or coming together just to talk about something or having a cup of coffee on a weekly basis is so important. And I don't know how much, how I know people come out to school in that, but how much are the youngsters doing that? And I wonder if you can comment on that and what's your experience with youngsters and these days?
Yeah, well, for here, so where I work, I mostly, for the bulk of my day, we have a school for like 3 months old through 6th grade. And I work a lot with the teenagers because I am preparing them to become a bar bat mitzvah, like the daughter or son of commandments. Like they're the age where they take on the responsibility to do things adults do, right? So that's why they say they're going to become a man or they're going to become a woman, but it's really that they are now worthy of the commandments, right? That they're at the age where they can visit the sick, or they can, give charity, or they fast on the holy days. They have these or they count as part of a group of people who it's called a minyan, where they're in a prayer service, and if somebody is saying the prayer for someone who's passed away, for example, you need 10 people. So the children then at that age count as one of the people. So I think that it's an awkward age, right? Because the teenagers are finding themselves, and there's a lot of pressure. There's school pressure, there's parent pressure, there's a need to fit in. There are all these things that are very confusing. So often what we see is a struggle between, why do I have to do this? And because I have so much going on. And so what we try to do, or I try to do with my students, is to have an understanding of how it can benefit them. Like maybe understanding, for example, that the practicing of the Hebrew is a part of executive functioning, that they're going to need to know how to stand up in front of a group of people one day and present a speech. And this particular act is something that will help them in the future, because they're going to need it, and they're not doing it because they're on their phones, and and the reality is, yes, while we're a tech-based world and we're behind Zooms and we're able to, I'm not flying right now out to be with you, but I can communicate with you this way. The reality is that that it's necessary to react and to speak with people face to face. We say panim al panim, like that you have to be with someone, in the presence of someone. So the act and the ritual of that preparation is really helpful when they don't have the accessibility, because everything is on the phone. And that said, a lot of what we do is through the phone. So we put a little bit of the sacredness through that, whether it's a Zoom lesson, whether it's a text from the rabbi saying, checking in, where's it going, how's your project doing, and just using that phone as the way to communicate initially. But then come on and be with me. It's much easier to connect if we're in the same physical space. We have those moments where the prayer shawl is put on, right? And when I was given it, I was one of the first girls to wear one, because the women weren't, allowed to back in my day when I was a child. But then now more and more women are able to be, considered in the service, and more of the observant ones as well. Yeah. And it was given to me. This is what you're given. The same thing, like the understanding. But this is actually a blanket of comfort for you, knowing that you have a people behind you, that you have support from your community, that you have support and tradition from your parents, and explaining that it's a piece of material that's meant to protect you. It's a piece of material that's meant to give you a little bit more comfort. That same healing conversation. So I think that it's maybe kids are more interested in learning about that. Yeah. And I would say I definitely have it where kids are asking me more questions. They're saying, well, what does this mean? And can you explain this to me a little bit more? And I would say maybe like 20 years ago, I wasn't hearing as many questions. It was if people were going through the motion. And we have in Judaism, when you pray, for example, there's kind of two parts to prayer. There's keva, it's called keva and kavanah. So there's the routine of it, and there's the intention. So you can get through like all of your obligations by doing the routine, saying all your prayers and doing all those things. And, you wake up in the morning, you say your prayers 3 times a day, whatever you're supposed to do. But if you don't have intention behind what you're saying, you're not really fulfilling it. So I kind of sometimes go the opposite way too. Like if a child doesn't prepare everything they need to prepare, but everything they're doing is with full intention, then that's okay too. So Of course you want to find a balance. We're not always going to be able to be connected, but the idea is that you can't have one without the other. So just going through the routine isn't enough. Yeah. But also having the intention and the desire and the want, even though you're not there yet, is also it counts.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I know. Yeah, thank you. No, it's incredible. You've gone into the rites of passage that the article was talking about. The next thing that I picked up from the article was the embodied experiences and the embodied stuff you do, but then the rites of passage, which you just talked about, and becoming of age. And and you know what they do is they give meaning through that the world requires something of you. So something's been asked of you. So like visiting the sick, as you said earlier, being counted as someone who prays, who can pray in the service. The world needs you, you know, and if you're on your couch and living through your phone most of the time, it doesn't feel like that. And you're living in a virtual world where there's no consequences almost. There's no one's calling you to act and actually things and be in the world and be in the world. And I think that's what religion and faith can really help us with, is give people those tools and to feel part of something that's much larger than that. And it's very powerful that you say the traditions that are being handed down, it's not just a piece of material, and there's people behind you, coming before you, egging you on, you know, and the community's there. What Jonathan Hyatt bemoans is also the loss of community, the loss of tight-knit communities. Now, there's something I heard you saying there. 20 years ago, there wasn't much of these questions. So why do you think is that saying that there's more curiosity now? And do you think there's sort of that new atheist movement I mentioned earlier, and religion maybe finding the tide is returning? So after the pandemic and after, you know, follow the science. I'm not anti-science. People think I'm anti-science, but I'm not anti-science. Follow the science and all this rhetoric. But do you think religion is making a little bit of not a comeback? I'm not going to say there's going to be a massive conversion and renewal, but why are there more questions now than
it could be. I mean, I don't know why per se. Sometimes I think about the idea that, you know, so many things are in our face all the time, and you know, while there are answers for things, because we have so much more information, there are so many more questions, right? And even what we're experiencing right now in the Jewish world with the rise of anti-Semitism, I believe that the question now is, why do people hate us so much? You know, why is this happening again? What have we done wrong? Where, you know, can you explain to me more about us so I understand why people feel this way? So I'm getting that. I'm also, though, getting from, you know, people who are older and, you know, facing this is I don't know how deep I can go, but I'll go a little bit to something that I know you must experience the same thing, but I do a lot with the elderly. And years ago, people didn't, my grandmother, we talk about it. Thank God my grandmother is still living, and she's 96 years old. And we talk about this, that they didn't talk about death. They didn't talk about dying. They didn't talk about these things because, you know, oh no, poo, we don't talk about it. That's just what happens and you deal with it. Now people want to not have to deal with the anxiety of what to do when they get to that stage. They want to understand more now so that when it comes, and if it comes, they can handle it better, and they know the routine and the rituals. So even with stages later in life, people are turning to me earlier and saying, I want to look at this now so I can digest it better. And I think that things are so hard to interpret that people are looking for other places to find answers. I have twin teenage boys. They're 13. And they're very, they love astrology, and they love science and math. And of course, they're also the rabbi's kids. So there's this, Mom, we're learning about like the history, like, but before the Torah, before the Bible, like the dinosaurs or whatever. And like, so I understand that everything is like, there's an answer for these things, but this doesn't really go with like Adam and Eve and those stories. So can you kind of explain to me like how it really works? And sometimes I say, you know, sometimes there's no explanation, right? And that is a religious response, is that the explanation isn't the spark of something that we don't know how that spark started, right? There's something there that came miraculously, and we can choose to believe in miracles, and we can choose to have that part where we don't have to know everything. And so it's, or the human beings who are looking for this, you know, way to connect, to answer things we can't answer. Religion helps us get through that. Religion helps us get through our lives. You look at the routine to give us structure, to give us guidance, so that we don't, when we feel like we can't feel anymore, or we are so caught up in the emotion of what's going on, that we have answers because of the ritual, because people before us studied and they figured out what human beings need to do to survive. So I think that there is this, we're in this survival mode, right? And so it's, everything is in our face. We see the news all the time. We feel people who are just saying things out loud because they have that permission to just be cruel or be, or be mean. We have bullies. We have all these things that we're facing. So all that is like, well, how do I, if I can't answer that in the moment, or I don't know what to say to this person, or I don't know how to respond to this, where else can I go? Maybe I can go inward. Maybe I can go into my own sense of who I am, and how do I find that? So I think it's because there's so many more questions out there, and there's so much information, that people are saying, how can I find some peace? How can I find something else that where I can disconnect from those things? And maybe that's it.
Yeah. We're talking about dinosaurs and astrology now, and science. So this might be a good segue to one of the things I'd like to address with the youngsters is the sort of street knowledge about the idea that religion, if you're religious, you must be somehow irrational, or it's an illogical thing, because, or it's not blatantly obvious, like you're saying, the answers aren't there sometimes. But to counter that, because I'm speaking to you as a rabbi, the Jewish contribution to the scientific world, I wonder if that could help speak to the youth, to remind them that actually these people of before us, it was because of their religious faith that led them to explore and discover and experiment and to find out these things. I wrote that some of the discoveries down here, like human blood groups, was a Jewish scholar. The discovery of penicillin to fight against diseases, an antibiotic for tuberculosis, and then not to mention Albert Einstein being Jewish. So it doesn't marry up with like, oh, you have to be stupid or not intellectual. Faith can actually be an intellectual decision, and rational and logical. And in fact, I, as a Christian, am a Christian because of the evidence, not despite the evidence, if that makes sense. So, and faith comes from trust. Trust is, it's episte. The Greek word is to trust. So, yeah, your comment on that.
Sure. Well, and also to add to your list, I mean, Israel and Tel Aviv is one of the most prominent high technology-driven, countries in the world. And they've, from the Apple chip. I mean, there's so many things that the Jewish people have created because you're right, of the fundamental teaching. There are three things on which the world stands. Torah, which is our tradition, our learning, our education, and a lot of what we learn isn't necessarily from the 5 books of Moses, but from the scholars' interpretation of the stories, right? The Talmud and the Mishnah. And then we have avodah, which is work, which is service, and then acts of loving kindness. But Torah means education. It means the root of the word is learning. I was doing some volunteer work the other day for the middle school band, and I'm at the cash machine. I'm taking cash. Kids are coming up, they're buying. It was a high school band day, and I was helping raise funds for the band. And there was a man next to me, and he asked me what I did for a living, and I explained. And I'm in an area where there are not many Jewish people where I was. And then I said I was a rabbi and a cantor. He says, "Oh, I know a couple of Jewish people. That's great." And then it says, it really boggles me, like how Jewish people are so successful and so wealthy. And first of all, I said, well, I didn't want to go there in front of all those kids. But for me, that's a response that is not kind, because that's a stereotype, and that but it's like very difficult to respond to something like that, because that's not something that's to me hurtful. But to explain that to somebody is very difficult who doesn't, because you really have to have a sit down conversation and explain why that's not something that, I necessarily want to hear. Of course, it was followed by a comment of, oh, and so you must be more wealthy than me, which again, I was like, well, today I'm here trying to do a good deed. But what I did say was, well, to explain something to you a little bit, is that our religion is founded on education, is founded on learning, and the idea that you have to understand where you are, what you can do, what the potential is, what the possibilities are, what all of those things that we've been given to push ourselves to learn more, to push ourselves to find out how we can serve not only God, but serve our world better. It's tikkun olam, to repair the world. You can't repair the world unless you know what to do, unless you have the information, you know the difference between news and fake news. And so it's very important that we do as much as we can to understand not only the facts, the history, but also the people. And religion helps understand people, like philosophy, all these things that people, oh, maybe even mental health isn't, oh, those are only for people who really can't. No, I mean, all of this is a whole person, right? We're looking at the entire person, which has heart, which has thought, which has health, all of these things combined. You can't only conquer one section of a person. You have to be mindful of the entire person, which is inclusive of emotions and feelings, and intellect. So it's not one or the other, it's a combination. And sometimes people get to certain things through other channels. So like we have talked about before the call a little bit, that I'm very involved in the autism community because I have 2 children on the autism spectrum. And they really motivated me to look through life in a different way. The way my brain works isn't necessarily at all the way another person's brain works. So I have to look through the eyes of somebody else. And in order to do that, I have to learn about that other person. And so that's where my religion really helped me, because I went back to the basics and acts of loving kindness, being slow to anger, being patient, all of the attributes of God, these are the things that enabled me to be a better person on a whole. So it's necessary. It's the opposite of it's almost required. How can you be a person who doesn't ask questions? And how can you be a person who stops just at one thing? I'm going, you know what? All I need is this book to tell me the answers, but I'm not going to address the other things I don't know about. And that all comes from that heart and soul and things that are, it's exciting. It's fun. It's actually
beautiful. It's beautiful that when this discussion is just so organic, because there's a prayer in the Christian tradition, I believe, Lord, help my unbelief. And it's that continual journey of discovering of you struggle with a few things are not straightforward, but you move forward from strength to strength, as you guys say. When you were talking there, I'm also struck by, and I remember a Jewish proverb that says, and you can correct me if it's not a Jewish proverb, but I think it is, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. And talking about your children and having autism, and then you said you had to see the world differently because people see the world as they are. They're meaning it doesn't not necessarily the truth that they see, so they have to work through that. We have to, maybe in a sense, with religious belief, put down our presumptions, put down our actually what we believe sometimes, to have a proper conversation with another person and to learn something new. If you think you know everything, you're not going to learn anything. And then lastly, I'd like to comment, which is when you were talking, you reminded me of correct my pronunciation, but midrash.
Yes, right. Like the stories that are the stories that we have, that we create almost, but based on the things that we don't know. That it's like in the Torah, they have the black letters, right? All the Hebrew letters, but you have the white spaces. So the stuff between the concrete stuff. Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong. In Judaism, when you need 2 people to have a discussion, to come to, when we talk over the scriptures of Torah. So, and I think Jesus said something about this. He said, when 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am. So some people interpret that as you need 2 people to come to God in a way. So it's like what we're saying going to Starbucks.
Yes.
You know, two people come together having a discussion, and something happens there. So in a more religious way, in a Jewish library, isn't it? So you talk over the scriptures, and then you come to an agreement, or you need both sides to come to an understanding of what the truth is. It can't just be held by one person, or you know. So that's that embodied stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So midrash. So a couple of sensitive topics came up there. I think as we speak, you know, violence rages in the Middle East and Palestine and Gaza, and Israel and Iran. I asked some of the school communities that they had any questions. So I guess this is a good segue into, they weren't sure about it, if they should ask questions about that, but I think we need to be as truthful as we can, and they would just wanted to find out what your perspective is on the conflicts. I know we've got only 19 minutes left. This could be the longest one or the shortest one, but we have a conflict going on, and what is your perspective, and therefore what's the way forward? What is the way forward? We're talking about religion, and as I said earlier, that a lot of people think religion is also the cause of a lot of the violence in the world, and they write it off because of that. And maybe we can speak truth to that. Yeah. So your perspective and the way forward, please.
Sure. Well, this is a really tough one. Of course, it's complicated, and it involves a lot of history. It involves a lot of knowledge. I am not an expert on politics, nor I am an expert on war. What I struggle with the most is how this particular war and this particular part of the world is always high emphasized over all other issues in the world, where there's so many stories of horror and genocide in other countries that we don't hear about at all, but we tend to always hear about it when it's this particular country, which is in and of itself frustrating. You're talking about millions of people around the world who are, protesting in support of Palestine, and we're the Jewish people, or people who are Israel who are not Jewish. Remember, it's not only Jewish people who live in Israel, and most of the Israelis are secular. They're not necessarily religious people, so which is why this is really, but the truth of all of the, for me, one of the most difficult things is whether or not you agree with the government in Israel and however you feel about the atrocities and things. Jews are always, Israelis and Jews to people outside are considered one, meaning so some people might say to me, oh, you're Israeli just because I'm Jewish. Now so regardless, we're all one, right? So all over the world, and we're connected. And of course, because it's our homeland, I understand that. And so even if you weren't connected, or even if you're someone who doesn't, for whatever reason, for Jewish people, it's all in one, no matter what we want to believe, number one. Number two, you don't have to agree with your own government, the way they handle things, but you can still have a love and understand that you deserve to have your country and your freedom and the way you want to live it. Israel is, if you've been there, if you haven't been and you don't go and you don't know, there's no way to talk about it. I don't think anyone should ever talk about it at all if they haven't been. I've been several times. I understand what happens. I know the people. I know what they work for. I know, what they want, that they ultimately want peace. I know there's a truth in their terrorism, and terrorists don't want peace. So no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, even if you're trying to figure out a way to make things work, people who want to kill other people and what they teach their children is pure hatred. I know that's not what is taught to me. I know what I learned. And I never learned anything about hurting. Everything that I've learned as a child, or that my friends who live in Israel have learned, is to help and to be peaceful. We don't use ourselves as sacrifices. We don't use children as shields. And for a terrorist organization to use media to the point where they're such experts at figuring out how to turn the world is hard. People who are not out there to do things like that don't do it well. So the media of Israel is terrible at showing what they do for the world, because that's not on their mind. They're not looking at it ahead of time to say, hold on, that's not what's actually happening. So you have a lot. My biggest fear is the fake news. My biggest fear is propaganda. My biggest fear is people jumping on because they want to be a part of what's the most popular thing, and not, again, the same thing that we were talking about earlier, not getting to the truths of the matter. Have mistakes been made? Yes. Is war complicated to understand? Yes. Does Israel have a right to defend itself? Yes. Should we be appalled that terrorists went in and murdered? And it's very graphic, what happened to innocent civilians, and the world forgot about it so quickly, is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So for me, I hope that, if anything, the people who have a soul or understanding of human beings, and the intention and the desire for peace, that the people want peace,
Yeah.
that the people who live there want peace, that people do work together, that there are. I went to the SodaStream factory in Israel years ago, and where they work to have people of the different countries working together. That's the idea, is that's what they're promoting it, but it's really hard to get to the facts. My daughter's in a college campus here, where she steps outside her door and everybody's protesting. She's had rocks thrown at her, and she's in one of the most, we went there because there's a large Jewish population, and now she doesn't want to stay there for graduate school, right, in DC. It's very complicated because people just jump on what they hear, and her roommates were posting things on Instagram that were not even true, and I had to kind of jump in and say, why are you saying this? This is not even a fact. Where did you get this from? Oh, well, I saw somebody else post it, and I think they're smart, and so that's a very dangerous, slippery slope. And if you don't have those, I'd say, places of worship where they're teaching peace and teaching how to understand how to come together and be a community that does service, if you're missing that part, it's easier to slip into that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I am on that.
Thank you. That's quite telling, as you ended there, was the embodied seeing people and talking to people. I did a few lessons in the classes here at school about conflicts, and I asked the class, what's the difference between having a conflict and a disagreement with a person online to being in person? And I think, if we meet people, even our enemies, those, and we try to come to an agreement in person, we have to meet face to face. This insidious fake news, as you said earlier, as you mentioned it, it's like wildfire, and it's the same with any topic. I think obviously yesterday was a big day for America, and it can trigger a lot of people. You can just go, well, Trump's this and Kamala's that, and it's just so you can't be in the middle and be, as I say, the midrash. You can't come to an agreement and find truth, because people are so polarized. You're either a right-wing Nazi or you're a left-wing liberal. There's no middle ground. And so, it's as I say in the beginning, we're living in dark times, but I think there's hope. I don't think anyone that's authentically religious and practices a religion to its to the truth and can think that what's going on is right, or any sort of violence is the answer. It cannot be. But if we can park that one and move on to another question from another pupil who was asking to change, not too much, change but they asked, why do people cover their eyes when reciting the Shema?
That's a really beautiful question, and I actually taught a little bit on it a while ago. I noticed that I wear glasses, and I kind of realized that when I was covering my eyes, I should really take off my glasses because it's an obstacle. But so I talked about obstacles that get in our way of concentration. It's about focus. You cover your eyes as not to be distracted by those words. Simple as that. They're it's the most holy statement for the Jewish people from the Torah. Yeah. There is a one God, right? Yeah. But really pay attention. The first word is "Hear, O Israel," but Shema is, you have all the senses in that word. You have the sh, you have the m, you have the ah. So you're using all of the parts of your mouth to say the word that means pay attention. So you can't really pay attention if you're distracted by other things. So the idea is you cover your eyes as to not be distracted by focusing on God's love and understanding that it goes on to the next, and you shall love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And in order to focus on those blessings, you cover your eyes. That's it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Could we sum this up in saying that religion can help us pay attention again, can help us wake up again, can help us be present again? Because, as Jonathan Hyde calls it, the phone-based world, or the virtual world we're living in, here in England, people are talking about banning phones at schools for youngsters, also banning social media up until 16, so you can have social media after you're 16. I think the phone affects attention and doesn't do anything for that presence. It doesn't do anything or fill us up. And in a nutshell, you can have the last word on this, but religion helps us to pay attention to the things that are important. Now, I am exploring the Eastern Orthodox Church, and services are 3 hours long. So, and you stand, there's no seats. So it is attention, and something happens when you are present and pay attention. It might take 30 minutes, might take an hour, but you get into that. Shema reminds me of, do you know also Psalm 46? Be still and know that I am God. And that be still as well. That I'm learning Greek now, but I'm not very good. But it's hesekiim, or it's also a bit like Shema. It says be still. It's like a complete attention. And once you are completely attentive, you will know that God is there. And you will know that there's one God, and that's all that matters. So on a last word about how religion can help us heal, what do you think?
I think it can help because it brings people back. It builds community, and that in one thing it is, you really can't do religion on your own. Like you said, you have to have a partner, but you really need a group of people. I've experienced this week, one of our members, his wife passed away, and in Judaism, we have what's called Shiva, which is a 7 days of mourning where people come to the house every single day to be and to pray with the person who is mourning. And if that person didn't have a community, they would be alone in this. And it's really hard to be alone when you're going through traumatic situations. So if anything, religion can really save people and can give them a place to feel that they are noticed and they belong. And belonging, the phone does isolate. It's not only on the kids, it's the parents. Parents are addicted to their phones, and the kids watch what the parents do. And if we're going to be real, that's their life. And so why, if children follow their ways, mostly to a certain age, other parents, but if that's what they see the most, that's hard. So is it on the kids to learn that on their own? No. But if children can kind of, this next generation is amazing, and they can say, this isn't good for us. It's good for many, many things, but not for our souls and not for our community, to be with others and not to feel, it's isolating. It's, you could be hurt. The bullying that happens on social media is beyond anything I've seen. So if even the idea that, you wake up in the morning and you say, thank God I can open my eyes. I know the difference between night and day. I wake up with a chance all over again to have a pure soul, and just go with that and have that be the drive of your day. Then it can make a difference. So there's so many parts of it. It could just be one little thing is what I would say if I were going to do it. Just one word, one teaching, just one thing. Can go a really long way. It doesn't have to be all at once. So,
Rabbi Julie Jacobs, what a pleasure and an honor, and I enjoyed this chat so much.
Me too. Sorry, I talked a lot.
That was great. No, it was great listening. I learned so much. Really, really grateful. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. I hope to be out there soon. I'll
That would be incredible.
Yeah, I would love it. I love being England. My